The emergency room never truly slept, but that night it felt restless, as if the walls themselves sensed something was about to fracture. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead while monitors beeped in uneven rhythms, echoing the fragile line between life and death. In the middle of that chaos stood a nurse most people barely noticed. She moved quietly, efficiently, her presence so understated that many mistook it for invisibility, until the moment it shattered. It happened in seconds. A sudden outburst, a sharp tug, a gasp swallowed by the noise of the ER. The chief surgeon's hand tangled in her hair, yanking her backward in front of patients, staff, and cameras that never stopped watching. Silence followed. Heavy, uncomfortable, dangerous, because no one expected what the quiet nurse would do next. Backhand index pointing right before the story continues. Take a moment to share, comment, and subscribe to Black Voice Stories. Your support helps bring these powerful stories to the world. Her name badge read Amara Lewis, though few ever bothered to say it aloud. She had worked in Mercy Heights Hospital for 7 years, long enough to memorize the cracks in the hallway tiles and the moods of every department head. She knew which elevators stalled on the 5th floor, which supply rooms were always missing gloves, and which surgeons believed volume was a substitute for authority. Amara had learned early that survival in a place like Mercy Heights meant mastering silence, not because she lacked intelligence or confidence, but because she understood the unspoken rules. The darker her skin, the quieter she was expected to be. The more capable she proved herself, the less recognition she received. She had graduated top of her nursing class, earned specialized trauma certifications, and volunteered for the hardest shifts, night rotations, overflow emergencies, holiday coverage when others claimed family obligations. She never complained, not because she didn't feel the sting, but because she knew how complaints were labeled when they came from someone like her. Difficult, emotional, unprofessional. So Amara became precise instead. Calm hands, sharp instincts. A presence patients trusted even when they couldn't name why. In trauma bays, she anticipated needs before surgeons asked. In crowded hallways, she redirected chaos with subtle authority. Doctors relied on her without ever acknowledging it. Especially Dr. Victor Harlan, the chief of surgery. Harlan was a legend within Mercy Heights. Award plaques lined the administrative wing with his name engraved in gold. His face appeared in donor brochures, local news segments, and medical journals praising his decisive leadership. Residents whispered about his temper, but administrators praised his results. In hospitals, outcomes mattered more than behavior. Harlan's authority filled rooms before he did. His voice carried sharp edges, his presence demanding obedience. Nurses learned to stay out of his way, especially nurses who looked like Amara. He rarely addressed her directly unless something went wrong, and when he did, his eyes held a familiar contempt masked as impatience. Amara noticed patterns others pretended not to see. How black and brown nurses were corrected publicly, while white colleagues were pulled aside privately. How mistakes by interns were framed as learning opportunities, while the same errors by minority staff became disciplinary issues. How Amara's calm competence was treated as expected, never exceptional. Still, she stayed, because Mercy Heights served a community that looked like her, because patients trusted her, because leaving felt like surrendering ground already hard-won. On the night everything changed, the ER was drowning. A multi-car accident flooded trauma bays with bloody bodies and broken bones. Sirens screamed outside while stretchers lined the hallways. Staff moved on adrenaline, and tension coiled tight in every corner. Amara was assigned to Trauma Bay 3. Dr. Harlan stormed in minutes later, barking orders without pause. His frustration was palpable, fueled by overcrowding and exhaustion. Amara worked seamlessly, passing instruments, stabilizing vitals, keeping her voice steady as panic tried to creep in. Then a monitor alarmed, not because of her mistake, but because another team delayed transferring a patient. Harlan's gaze snapped to Amara anyway. His jaw tightened. His steps were quick and aggressive. What followed wasn't just anger. It was entitlement. He reached out without warning. His fingers tangled in her hair, yanking her head backward as he shouted over noise. The pain was sharp, sudden, humiliating. Gasps rippled through the room. A patient cried out. Another nurse froze. Time slowed. Amara felt the pull on her scalp, the heat rising in her chest, the familiar pressure to swallow the moment and disappear. But something in her broke free instead. The ER didn't explode into chaos the way movies portrayed. It fractured quietly. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Movement slowed. Eyes darted away, pretending not to see what everyone had just witnessed. Dr. Harlan released her hair as abruptly as he grabbed it, already turning back toward the patient as if nothing had happened. As if Amara were just another piece of equipment he'd adjusted too roughly. But Amara didn't move. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Years of swallowed indignities rushed forward, each one stacking atop the last. The condescending remarks, the public reprimands, the extra scrutiny, the unspoken message that her body, her dignity, were secondary to his authority. She stepped back deliberately, grounding herself. The pain on her scalp pulsed, but she focused on her breathing instead. Around her, no one intervened. Not the residents. Not the attending physicians. Not the charge nurse watching from the doorway. Silence had protected them all before. It would not protect her now. Amara documented everything. Not emotionally. Clinically. Time. Location. Witnesses. Exact wording. She noted the presence of security cameras in Trauma Bay 3, their red lights blinking steadily. She finished her shift without confrontation, knowing that reaction without strategy would be dismissed as emotional. By morning, rumors had already begun to circulate. Whispers in break rooms. Carefully worded concern. Subtle warnings disguised as advice. Be careful. He's powerful. You don't want to ruin your career. Amara listened, nodded, and continued writing. She submitted a formal incident report before her next shift ended. Then another. Then one to Human Resources. Then one to the hospital's compliance office. Each document mirrored the last in precision and restraint. The response was predictable. An investigation was opened. Quietly. Temporarily. Dr. Harlan continued working. Amara was reassigned to less visible shifts for her comfort. She was advised to avoid direct contact with him until things were resolved. Resolved meant buried. What administrators didn't expect was that Amara had already gone further. She requested security footage through official channels, citing patient safety concerns. She contacted the nurses' union, though she'd never been vocal before. She spoke to an employment lawyer who listened without interruption and nodded knowingly. Most importantly, she spoke to other nurses. In whispered conversations that grew bolder with each telling, stories emerged. A hand on a shoulder that lingered too long. A shouted insult masked as instruction. A shove in a hallway. None had been reported. All had been endured, because silence felt safer. Until it didn't. When the internal investigation concluded, the findings were inconclusive. No disciplinary action was taken. Dr. Harlan received a reminder about professional conduct. Amara received performance review questioning her team compatibility. That was when she made her final move. Her lawyer filed a formal complaint not just against Dr. Harlan, but against Mercy Heights Hospital itself. Workplace assault, racial discrimination, retaliation, the filing referenced camera footage, witness statements, a pattern of behavior spanning years. News outlets caught wind of it within days. The hospital that once praised its commitment to diversity scrambled to control the narrative. Statements were released. Committees were formed. Donors asked questions administrators couldn't deflect. Inside the ER, tension simmered. Staff took sides. Some avoided Amara altogether. Others offered quiet support. A few finally spoke openly, lending their testimonies to her case. Dr. Harlan stopped making eye contact. For the first time, his authority felt fragile. The hearing took place in a sterile conference room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and anxiety. Amara sat upright, hands folded neatly in her lap. Across from her sat hospital executives, legal teams, and Dr. Harlan himself. He looked smaller outside the operating room. Screens displayed footage from Trauma Bay 3. The moment played on loop. The reach, the grab, the yank, the stunned stillness afterward. There was no sound, but none was needed. Amara's statement was read aloud. Calm, detailed, unemotional. It contrasted sharply with the defense's attempts to minimize the incident as stress-induced behavior. Stress, Amara learned, was always an excuse when power was involved. Witness after witness spoke. Nurses, residents, orderlies. Patterns emerged, not just of abuse, but of who bore it most often. Race entered the room like an uninvited guest no one could ignore. By the end of the day, the board had no room left to hide. Dr. Harlan was placed on immediate leave pending further action. Donors withdrew funding. The hospital faced public scrutiny unlike anything in its history. When the final decision was announced weeks later, it reverberated far beyond Mercy Heights. Dr. Victor Harlan was terminated. The hospital issued a public apology, not just to Amara, but to every employee harmed under its watch. Mandatory training programs were implemented. Reporting systems were overhauled. Leadership was restructured. None of it erased what had happened, but it changed what could happen next. Amara returned to the ER months later, not quietly this time, but with her head held high. The halls felt different. Not perfect, not healed, but aware. Her presence was no longer invisible. Amara never sought fame. She declined interviews that sensationalized her pain. She redirected attention to systemic change rather than personal victory. When asked why she spoke up, her answer was simple: because silence costs too much. New nurses approached her now, not with whispers, but with gratitude. Patients recognized her name. Administrators listened when she spoke. The ER still buzzed with chaos, but something fundamental had shifted. Accountability was no longer optional. Amara understood that her story wasn't unique. It was just documented. Across hospitals, offices, and institutions everywhere, quiet people endured loud injustices every day. Her courage didn't eliminate the problem, but it cracked the armor protecting it. And sometimes, that's enough to start a reckoning. If the story moved you, challenged you, or reminded you of a truth you've seen firsthand, don't stay silent. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to Black Voice Stories, because these stories matter. And so, do the voices behind them.